Everyone, and welcome back to Always Watching. Today I am continuing my coverage for the Tribeca Film Festival with the documentary Driver. Briefly, Driver, directed by Nessa Azimi, follows Desiree Wood, a long-haul truck driver fighting for a life on the road. The documentary follows Desiree over a span of 3 years to examine the plight of female truck drivers in America. This documentary is very intimate. We follow Desiree on and off the road to get insight into a community that many of us know nothing about. During COVID, truck drivers were essential workers, ensuring that all our daily needs were met. However, despite their importance, this is an incredibly predatory industry that takes advantage of those in dire need. The documentary does a great job of using Desiree to show and explain to audiences how exactly this industry takes advantage of women in particular. Everything about this documentary felt very natural. There's no story being forced on us. It doesn't narrate or explain anything. It just observes and reports and leaves it up to the audience to decide what they want to take away from it. The female truck driving community in this documentary is portrayed as having a very united front, and many of the women interviewed have similar stories of abuse and mistreatment, not just on the road, but in their personal lives as well. Life on the road is incredibly tough. It has its ups and downs, and it also has a 200% turnover rate, and due to deregulation, many drivers work the equivalent of 2 full-time jobs. Recruiting new drivers is big business because it is subsidized by the American taxpayer. Therefore, it's not that difficult for these companies to make a quick buck off of someone. They don't really need their employees to be working for them for a long period of time in order to turn a profit. Through Desiree, the documentary gives voice to these women and also shows us how difficult it is to hold anyone accountable for this violence that they have endured. I also felt the documentary laid out a great case in terms of explaining to audiences how this is a systemic issue and not just a few isolated incidences. We followed Desiree to several meetings of women explaining how, despite reporting their assailant, nothing was done about it, and it seems that these companies actively suppress and even reward people for keeping silent. Women describe dropping off shipments and being assaulted, and it seems like there's kind of a culture of abuse here that starts very early on at the recruitment stage. Trainees are actually required to live in the truck for about 30 days, usually with a male instructor who has the power to either pass and fail them. And at one point, Desiree explains that as a former stripper, she had more protection at the club than on the road. I think because we're following people who are working day to day, it's a lot easier to appreciate the discrepancy between what these companies say to the public in terms of, oh, we're protecting all these workers, to what's actually going on the ground. Like, there's just a huge gap between what the companies are saying they're doing and what is actually happening in reality. Desiree, as well as other drivers, explain how difficult it is to maintain this job. These companies target very vulnerable individuals and claim that this is easy money. You know, it's a very lucrative business, but this is very far from the truth. We see that Desiree owns her own truck, and throughout the documentary, we see that it's very difficult to maintain this truck. She's constantly doing her best to keep her vehicle from being repossessed. And a lot of these companies have figured out a way to offset their costs onto their employees. And one of the ways they do that is by getting them to buy these enormous vehicles, telling them that it will basically pay itself off. But of course, that's never the case. Oftentimes they're repossessed and the driver is worse off than when they began. And because their salaries are not consistent, they're living paycheck to paycheck, and these paychecks seem to be very few and far in between. And trucking, like any labor-intensive job, is male-dominated. This is not the type of profession women would normally go into. And even in the documentary, many of the women are older. I didn't really see any millennial-aged or people under the age of 40, really. And I suspect it's because of the 200% turnover rate. And ideally, this should be a profession where people can make a decent living for themselves and their family, or even use it as a way to start their life. However, because it's been deregulated, the only people making money are those skilled at taking advantage of others very quickly. And since they purposely target individuals that are limited in terms of career options, you can actually trap people. Like it becomes a bit of a trap where people end up staying in this job because they really have nowhere else to go. And so the film ends on the road, and appropriately so, because this will be an uphill battle. This is not an issue I knew anything about. And I felt like the documentary did a great job of extracting the nuances and really explaining how this abuse has been going on, what it looks like, and who is affected by it. So it's definitely one of my favorite documentaries I have seen so far. So if you get a chance, please check it out. You guys let me know what you think, and until next time.